Okeanos.
Consciously or otherwise, habituation is a concept that has great influence on how people interact with the world. Defined as the diminishing of a physiological or emotional response to a frequently repeated stimulus, it is a natural byproduct of sheer, constant exposure to anything. Now, I'm aware that this may seem to be coming out of left field given the title of this video, but hear me out. Simply put, habituation occurs when the human body adapts and buffers or shuts out a continuously firing stimulus of any kind. But what's most important is that the stimulus is constant and unchanging. For example, our pupils dilate to allow more light in when we're in a dark place to see better, and they constrict when it's bright for the opposite reason and same purpose. If you're sitting on a chair or something similar right now, it's likely that you did not consciously feel the chair underneath your fine ass until you heard me say this. Our neurons fire and we feel the chair and take note of this initially, but over time the stimulus fades and we become used to it, until the feeling of the chair fades away and we focus on other things. Now, habituation is important because it translates over to media and stories as well, in terms of tone, approach, and style. If a film has too many explosions and too much action, without much substance or variation to it, we become habituated and bored by the spectacle, as these sequences lose their punch. If a story focuses on one tone for multiple arcs throughout, the result will be an experience that becomes tiring over time. This is partly why sports anime divide long, tense matches up with slice-of-life or comedy segments, as a deliberate break from the action. But to the subject at hand, too much misery without respite could leave the viewer feeling unfulfilled. If a very dark and dreary story does not have well-executed narrative, thematic, or tonal variation, the constant exposure to this depressing atmosphere will likely make the audience less impacted by the tragedy and emotional lows than they would have if the story had its share of light. And that is why Waver and Ryder are arguably the most important characters in Fate Zero. Ufotable's anime, penned as a collaborative work between Gen Urobuchi and Kineko Nasu, is clearly intended to be very dark and tragic, and this much is clear through just a summary of the characters and themes. Kiritsugu is constantly ominous and deeply sad, being forced to commit acts that he hates to carry out his goal. Saber and Irisfield's relationship is indeed a bright one, but it's overshadowed by both Irisfield's imminent death and gradually increasing weakness, and Saber's sad struggle to cling on to her ideals as she is constantly given reasons to abandon them. Kire and Gilgamesh's story is about giving in to sadistic, destructive pleasure. Kaneth is an aristocratic, cruel, classist dickhead. Lancer is constantly reminded of his past sins and given no chance to properly atone and fight the beautiful fight that he so desires. Tokiomi is a grim look into the traditions and sad customs of mages in this universe. Ryunosuke and Castor are child-killing psychopaths. Berserker is a man driven to insanity through not being punished for his wrongdoings, and Kadia's story is an inhumanely cruel portrait of tragedy. While there is some small tonal balancing through Irie and Saber's dynamics, Saber and Lancer's relationship, and the amusing dark wit of Gilgamesh, the prevailing trait in each of these characters is a dark or tragic one, and the effective atmosphere of the work makes this palpable in most scenes. The minor characters of Maya, Sakura, Rin, Natalia, and Zoken all follow this pattern as well, and the fact that the majority of the darker antagonistic characters ended the series positively, and most protagonists were left devastated, is telling. The futility and pointlessness of war, the foolishness of honor and sentiment, the sheer difficulty of redemption, and, perhaps most prominently explored, the naivete of romantic ideals. These are all primary themes of the work, and these are all quite depressing if explored the way Fate Zero explores them. There is just a palpable feeling of hopelessness and failure that is encapsulated by these ideas and character arcs. This is a brutal story. But what's key is that it is not too brutal, at least in my humble opinion. Overall, it is a gut-wrenching tale, and as we'll get to soon, it is understandable that many misunderstand the main theme of the work due to this, but it never crosses the line. Fate Zero is not needlessly grim, and the interjection of Rider-Waver sections is very deliberately done to ensure this. Simply put, this story would have been far too dark without this partnership. There is never a segment of story that goes on too long or ends up being too bleak before the duo are reintroduced, and the vast majority of these instances are significantly less depressing than the ones with other characters, with the charming, funny banter between the two being both natural and a welcome respite. But what truly helps Waver and Rider to balance the story so well through their light is the essence of their characters and relationship dynamics, and how starkly these elements contrast nearly everything else. Waver is a simple young man desperate to prove himself. He wants respect, he wants people who look down upon him to see that they're wrong, and he wants to show that potential is not dependent on class or which generation of mage one is. He has pretty substantial insecurities because of his lack of achievements, but due to his endeavors, he is not crippled by them, and he uses them to drive forward. Quite simply, he wants to achieve important things to stand on his own 2 feet, something that isn't easy in this setting. And the Holy Grail War is the perfect avenue for that. On the other hand, Rider is quite clearly a born, charismatic leader. Outspoken, positive, and brash, it is easy to see why he captures the hearts and spirits of those who follow him. Fixated on conquest and victory, his prevailing goal is to conquer the entire world and reach the shores of Okeanos, where he has never been before. He approaches this impossible dream with an admirable, some would say foolish persistence, and due to this passion, he is characterized by an extreme idealism. And in a story that can very easily delve into nihilism, this is key. Now, one would think that Waver having Rider as his servant would be great for someone who wants to win the Grail. But in actuality, it does him no favors because Waver wants to win due to his own merits rather than because of the strengths of his servant. He does not want to lean on anyone.
You see, with a servant like you who's practically guaranteed to win, I couldn't take pride in winning the Grail. If I'm going to die fighting in my own battle, I'm not going to complain! That's the reason why I decided to join the Grail War. And now...
Him being gifted with such an impressive servant makes him even more insecure, because victory comes so easy to his partner. He feels dwarfed by the impressiveness of Rider. Waver wants to do more. He thirsts for agency, and he is consumed by an inescapable need to prove himself right here and right now, to silence the doubters. He is desperate. However, Rider tells him to take life at its own pace. That he should set goals, but not be in a rush to meet them. That he should enjoy life and conduct himself properly, and if he does so, the achievements that he will be proud of will come along naturally.
You have no idea what you're talking about!
You don't need to be in such a hurry. Nobody said that the Holy Grail War would be the single most important event of your entire life. There will be others.
What?
When the day finally arrives that you find a way to live that you can truly be proud of, you will be forced into your own grand battle, one that you will have to fight whether you want to or not. You will have plenty of time then to look for your battlefield. Face it. You are a stubborn and incorrigible idiot. Your deepest desires are far greater than yourself. That miserable, complaining nature of yours is a sign that somewhere inside you is a conqueror. No matter what you want me to believe, you are acutely aware of how small you are. And yet, in spite of that, you still struggle to reach heights greater than you could ever begin to imagine.
What's most notable here is Rider's admiration of Waver's frustration and ambition. The boy dreams to achieve things bigger than himself, but being in a rush to achieve them will only lead to disappointment. Focus too hard on actually achieving difficult goals rather than the path to getting there, and the value of those goals will pass you by. What others think of you is irrelevant. Your reputation is not worth rushing through life over. And in the here and now, Waver just needs to stick to what he's good at, with no need to try to do more than he is capable of to impress. He doesn't need to be anything other than himself to be a valuable asset to Rider. There is no need to worry about being small and insignificant as long as one stands for something and has pride in their cause. Contrary to what Waver assumed, the two are teammates and equals, brothers in arms against the world. And this speech stirs something in Waver, helping him to truly kickstart his development. Through these words and his many experiences, he learns to embrace his weaknesses, learn his strengths, and find his own worth in life, aside from trying to look to others for validation. Because of Ryder, he is able to grow and take charge of his life. By the end, we see leaps and bounds of development in Waver, and while Ryder himself doesn't receive too much, he didn't need it. He is a teacher, one who learns to respect Waver. It's a dual character journey that is polar opposite in feel to the rest of the story. A give-and-take relationship, one of self-betterment, learning to have confidence and conviction, and as we'll discuss in a minute, enjoying the pursuit of ideals. It's an intentional antithesis to the rest of the series, and this balance is essential. But as important as these two are for providing a narrative and thematic counterweight to balance the approach, their importance is not limited to their pseudo-mechanical function. What's most significant about them is that through this contrast, they provide arguably the most prevailing theme that Fate Zero has to offer. Not only would this story have been too dark to achieve the intended outcome without Waver and Ryder, but they themselves are the prime display of the narrative's main, overarching message. Without them, the story would have been a numbing tale about futility, communicated through several parallel arcs, unfocused and scattered. But with them, we can see quite a different theme that is ironically not as brooding as one might assume. And it all has to do with Ryder's attitude towards reaching Okeanos, culminating with his realization and epiphany prior to his death. Every theme I listed earlier was about hopelessness in some way. But the story and arc of Waver and Ryder turn those themes on their head to make the final message surprisingly quite uplifting.
Did you see that, King of Conquerors? Such is Saber's brilliant skill. Having seen such light, you still refuse to grant her your respect?
That might is the result of her accepting the hopes and dreams of the people of her time. It hurts me because it's so bright. And because I know that this burden was thrust upon the shoulders of a little girl. What I see is what became of a girl who was never allowed to admire butterflies or flowers or fall in love, but was instead taken hold of by the curse of ideals. It is too painful to look upon.
Which is exactly what makes her so endearing. The unattainable dream she held so dear was certain to explode in a brilliant flare that would burn her to ash. The tears of bitter lamentation she shed. How sweet they'd have tasted as she laid there dying.
You and I will never get along.
What Ryder postulates here is what the story communicates. He finds Saber's predicament achingly sad, and the curse of ideals here that he discusses is in reference to the tragedy of her being doomed for failure due to being taken hold of by ideals and not being able to use them to achieve her ultimate dream. Being possessed by these notions and not truly living. It's a microcosm of what seems to be the narrative's take on ideals, that they are futile and will not lead to any salvation. But by the end, the story adds an alternate dimension to this idea, completing it and showing us the full picture. The curse of ideals is that if one uses them alone, with the hopes of achieving the grandest of ambitions, it will end in failure. But is that really as bad as it sounds? Ryder has always been fixated on the journey to goals rather than the goals themselves, but he has always aspired to reach his promised land. The journey had always been more important than the destination, but Ryder still wanted to reach his destination. It has always been part of his plan, despite his philosophy. But when his last hope was extinguished, he realized something about himself.
Have you awakened from your dream, King of Conquerors?
I suppose I have. However, once again, during this glorious campaign, my heart was able to dance a good deal. Now I see. It was the beating of my heart. It was the sound of Okeanos' waves.
He sees here that he will never reach the shores of Okeanos, but he is okay with that, because the trials, the suffering, the joys, and the experience made the adventure a reward in itself. Glory lies beyond the horizon, and there is always another horizon. Ryder breathes his last breath in pure satisfaction, realizing that not only was the chase far more fulfilling than the prize, but that he didn't need the prize anyway. This reinforces and adds a twist to his words throughout the story, that maybe dreams should be abstract concepts that cannot be given substance. As said by commenter Destructive Blade, a dream loses all of its value when it becomes reality, and as such, the dream should be something grand and larger than life itself. The exact way Waver approached his ambitions. Though, again, his earlier rushed desperation is discouraged. The importance is in how unobtainable this dream is. Don't be afraid to live for a dream that is impossible, while knowing that it is impossible. Once you reach a smaller goal, set another one immediately, and never stop the endless pursuit that is life. Constantly learning, constantly growing, and constantly living. Ryder lived his entire life like this and passed it on to Waver, who becomes much less focused on some end goal and more concerned with just enjoying the ride. The never-ending dream.
I will someday overtake and even surpass the entire world! Nothing can ever stop my quest, for in my chest beats the invincible heart of the King of Conquerors. Like they say, glory lies beyond the horizon. Back in the world that I lived in, that was the fundamental rule of a full life.
Is that why you kept rushing towards the east all the time like some kind of idiot?
Of course, that's right. I wanted to see Okeanos with my own eyes. But alas, my glorious dream was never realized.
Huh?
Even now, boy, Okeanos remains the place I strive for. It is a never-ending dream. Laugh if you like. I, who after 2,000 years still dream the same dream about a place he's never seen, I'm a great fool. So you see, boy, a pact with an idiot like you is just perfect for me.
Again, this is in clear opposition to those in the story who failed and ended their pursuit in tragedy after fully expecting, or at least hoping, for success in their end goal. Contrasting Saber, who valued her goal so much that failure crushed her. And Lancer, who was robbed of his beautiful battle. And Kiritsugu, devastated after believing that the Grail would deliver him from all of his suffering and sins. There is great meaning in the fact that these two were the only protagonistic characters who achieved fulfillment with ideals intact, and were actually benefited by the experience. That in the face of darkness, conflict, strife, and insurmountable odds, the most value can be derived from persistence and pursuit. From ideals themselves, happiness can be found, which is appropriate for a narrative that focuses on ideals more than arguably anything else. Ironically, this theme is also backed up by Kire and Gilgamesh, who, despite seeming to oppose this mentality, resolve to live life for its little pleasures by the end. It all adds depth, duality, and richness to the themes of the series that really helps it to distinguish itself. Once again, it's all about this contrast from Waver and Ryder to counter the habituation regarding themes of futility, to shine a light on this series. The story forms its thesis through the one partnership that realized the usefulness of idealization and unreachable dreams, the two that never allowed themselves to be crushed by the burden of expectation. To pursue grand ambitions endlessly with conviction, to find the fulfillment in existence through the infinite journey. That is the true message of Fate Zero.
Ryder!
Glory lies beyond the horizon. Challenge the unattainable. Speak of conquest and make it real. For my men and for those who watch behind me.